One of the things that you're going to notice in C++, and this is one of those aspects of C++ that confuses a lot of new people to it, is the idea of using pointers. And pointers are used quite a bit, and you can do some really neat things with them. Well, in this very short video, I'm going to answer the very basic question, just what is a pointer? Well, if I go back to my 7th grade days and talk about what a pointer is one who points to something. All right, and if you remember back when you were in junior high school, you would have these word exams, these word tests, and you hadn't studied, and so anything with an ER turned into one who. You know, a refrigerator, one who refrigerates. So a pointer is one who points to something. Now, in this instance, that is actually a really good definition, because more specifically, when we're talking about pointers in the software world, we're talking about a variable that points to something. And even more specifically, a variable that, rather than holding data, simply points to the address location of another variable that is holding data. All right? Now what this gives us is a kind of referential relationship between our data, and we can do a lot of neat things with it. Now, how do I create a pointer? Now there's a couple of ways to do this. The first thing is we're going to use an asterisk in our variable declaration. And so as you can see here, we've chosen to put the asterisk next to the data type. And this is not saying that I'm creating a variable called a that's of a type integer. I'm actually doing something a little different. Now let me show you this right quick before I go into that. I can also put the asterisk closer to the variable itself, to the a. Either one of these are completely legal ways of going about creating a pointer. All right? Kind of the only general rule out there is do it consistently when you're doing it in your code. All right, so pick one of these that you like for whatever reason and stick with it. All right, but once I've done this, instead of creating a variable called a that has a data type of integer, what we have actually created, and the way to say this is the type of a is now a pointer to integer, or we've created a as a pointer and we can point that to any integer. All right, now I'm going to stop here. That's the absolute basics of a pointer. A pointer is a variable that points to something else, and specifically it points to a certain variable with a certain data type. All right, now in the next few videos we'll kind of build on this and explain it and show you quite a few examples, but for now this is what a pointer is, what it does, and then right here how you create one. Now before we dig too far into pointers and what they are and how they work, let's talk about some pointer terminology. Now pointers confuse everybody, and when you're coming in new to one of these languages, one of the C-type languages that use pointers, it's very easy to get confused. And so let's just kind of start at the very bottom and work our way up. Okay, first of all, the term you need to understand in pointers is variable. Now this is the easy one. We all know what variables are. For example, here, notice, now I don't have my semicolon here because I want to make it as simple as possible. We are creating a variable called a. It is going to hold data type of integers, and we are preloading it with 6, or we initializing it with the value of 6. Okay? And a variable simply stores values at a memory location that has an address. Now we've never had to worry about this outside of C languages. We created variables, they just magically got created out there somewhere, and then when we wanted to use them, we just referenced them and either read from them or wrote to them, and everything was cool. Now we pick up this idea of pointers, and the game's changing a little bit. Now to create a pointer, and you'll see this a little bit more later, but I just want to kind of give you the basics here. We're going to create a pointer called PNBR, pointer number, if you will, and the asterisk tells us this is a pointer. It's going to be it's going to hold types of integer, or it will point to integer. And notice here this P, and I've got a note here. When you create pointers, go ahead and put a P on the front. That's kind of a standard nomenclature out there amongst C++ programmers, and this lets us know that P number is a pointer to a variable. Now, I did not want to go ahead and point this particular pointer to a variable, and so I initialized it with something new. In the latest version, or release of C++, and that is the null pointer, NULLPTR designation here. And this just says make it empty. We used to use the word null. Lots of reasons why this is better, so let's just leave it like that for now. So a pointer is a variable that points to another variable of a certain type, and it lets us either see the address of that other variable or the data that is stored in that variable. Okay, and then again, null pointer, null PTR, indicates that this particular pointer, PNBR, is not pointing to anything yet. Okay, so there's two terms. We got variables and then we have pointers. All right, now when I create a pointer like I did here with pnumber, you will notice right down here that once I have done this, then pnumber is now said to be a variable of type pointer to integer. All right, so this is a variable and it is a pointer to integers. Okay, so it's a type pointer to integer. Now, next term, address of operators. Once we have created a pointer, we now need to find some way to read the addresses. And the ampersand, all right, or the and sign is our address of operator. It returns the memory address of a variable. Now, this will work with any variable. So if I create a variable A and then go back and try to read and I put ampersand A, this is saying don't give me the value of A, give me the address of A. And if I read that, I will see that it is equal to 0028FCOC, 0C that is. That is a hex address for where the variable A's contents is actually being stored. All right. Now, there's also an indirection operator that you'll have to deal with when you're working with pointers, and this is the asterisk, okay, the asterisk. And this probably looks somewhat familiar to you. The asterisk is used for a lot of different things in C++, and I'll actually talk about that in a video a little bit later on, so don't worry about that right now. Now, what does the indirection operator do? It dereferences a pointer. Another way to say that in English is that it returns the value of the variable that it's pointing to. All right? It dereferences, in other words, we're not worried about the reference or where it's located. We're worried about the actual value that is stored in it. Okay? So once I go up and I create the pnumber pointer and then I point it to a variable like A, I can store the address of A in my pointer, and then I can use the indirection operator asterisk pnumber, and if I look at that and get the results of that, it will actually give me the value that is in the variable that it's pointing to, or A. And again, hope all that doesn't confuse you. If it does, welcome to the club. All right, I'll show you some coded examples of this a little bit later on, but for now, that's the terminology that you need to get your head around. And although at the end of this video you certainly probably aren't very comfortable with these terms at this point, I'm going to show you how to get comfortable with them, but you need to get as comfortable as you can with them, because the more you understand these, the more you'll know when and how to use them to do some really neat things in C++. Now let's talk about exactly how pointers work. Now I'm going to do simple little animation here. It's going to look kind of busy by the time we get done, but I want you to get a good visual of how pointers function, what's going on when you call these different pieces and parts of pointers, and then we'll actually take this into Visual C++ and write some code in some separate videos, okay? But for now, let's go through this topic of pointers and variables and the whole thing, okay? Well, in our code, from time to time, we will write a line similar to this. We will create a variable called A. We'll make it a type of integer, and then we will initialize that A to have a value of 5. Okay? So as you see, I've created a variable called A. It's an integer data type, and it's holding a value of 5. Now when I do that in my code, what it's doing is, out in the memory on my computer, it is creating a memory location that it gives the title of A to, and it puts the value of 5 there. Now, the memory location for my variable A that is holding the value 5 is, this is a hex value, 0028FC0C. All right? So that is the creation of a variable and what's going on out in memory. Now if I ever try to read the value of A, then A simply goes to that memory location and it gets the value and it returns it to me. Now all this part about going out there and finding the memory location and returning the value, all that's done in the background for me. I just know that I tried to reference A and tried to read it and it came back to me. Now if I use the ampersand in front of A, that's the address of operator, and return that, notice now that will actually go get me the address of the A variable, and it won't return the value. It will actually return this value. And again, you'll see this in code in some separate videos. All right. So once we've created a variable in C++, we can read the variable, which will give us the value, or we can use the address of operator with the variable and we can get the actual address. Now this gives us a little clue about what's going on with pointers, because when I create a pointer, notice I'm creating a pointer called PNBR. The asterisk tells me this is a pointer. I put the P in there to help me remember when I look at this later that it's a pointer, and it's going to point to integer data types, and I'm creating it empty, and that's why I'm passing it null PTR. So what this does in memory is it goes out, it creates an actual variable called PNBR. It itself has an address. Don't worry about that so much right now, but you will notice it doesn't have a value. Nothing is here. All right. But what I do next is I execute this command. P number, which is the pointer that I created, I set it equal to the address of A. All right. And so now you'll notice P number is equal to this number, which is the same as this number. So P number here is equal to the address of A, which is this. All right. Make sure you got that burned in your brain. Make sure it's making sense. All right. Now, if I call the asterisk P number, okay, and this is the dereferencing of P number, this is telling it, hey, tell me what, show me the value of whatever P number is pointing to. And so when I execute this and try to read it, notice it goes to P number and then it reads it, and it says, okay, he's trying to read the value of whatever is at 0028FC0C. So it goes to that location, 0028FCOC, and it gets the value for me, 5, and it returns it back. All right. Now that is very, very simply how all these different pieces and portions and terminologies and pointers work, and then what it looks like in code. All right. I would strongly suggest you watch this video a few times, get comfortable with it. Now you're still going to get confused. The best way I can describe this is, again, those, if you remember those 3D pictures you used to see in the newspapers, and they had the books all out in the bookstores, and when you look at the picture it just looks like this mix of colors. But if you hold it just right and take your eyes out of focus a little bit, turn your head, cough, and all that stuff, you would see this 3D image slowly appear, and it's usually the pyramids or the space shuttle or something. Now when you were learning how to do that, sometimes it would pop right into focus, and then you'd kind of feel it slide away and you'd lose it. But the more and more you looked at it, the easier it got to be to make that thing show up and to hold it there. It's going to be the same thing with pointers. These things just confuse us. They're really not that complicated, but they just get confusing. All right. But the more you work with them, the more you play with them, and the more you look at examples like what I've just shown you here, the easier it's going to get. Okay. But let me give you a little hint here. To work with C++ in an advanced mode, you need to know and understand pointers like the back of your hand. Okay, so we'll dig into more of these a little bit later on. We'll actually go out and write some code with them and look at some cool examples that'll help you even further.